Okay, TBD Pod, welcome everybody. Today we have Rico Smith. Rico, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Now, Rico, you're running for office here in Florida. The 60, I don't want to screw this exactly up, but explain to people what office you're running for.
Yes, so I'm running for the Florida House of Representatives, District 67, which is all of the New Tampa, USF area, Tampa Palms, all the way to the county line, right south of Wesley Chapel. And then it brings itself all the way down through Mango, the Notasassa, Sefner, and the north side of Brandon. So a very large territory.
Very large territory. And you got some suburbs in there, and you have some rural areas.
Yes.
And you also have parts of Tampa.
That's right.
The city of Tampa and New Tampa?
They have the city of Tampa because all of the New Tampa is considered, it was annexed into Tampa. And then you also even have the northernmost part of Temple Terrace.
Wow.
Yeah.
So a district that is diverse in terms of ideology. I mean, you probably have people living on farms, but then you also have people living in gated communities within the city.
That I've seen it. I'm door knocking. One day I'm in one side of the district, and truly, yeah, you see cows or chickens, and next thing you know, you go to another side, and it's multi-million-dollar homes up in the New Tampa area.
It's the story of America. All these varying different people from different backgrounds. It's kind of cool that you get to express that within your own little district you're running for.
Right.
I say little. It's actually a lot of people. Do you know how many people live in the district?
So when you look at who you represent, it's about 190,000 people.
Wow.
Yes.
It's a lot of people.
Oh, yeah.
It's a lot of people.
Oh, yeah.
Out of 20, I believe, 4 million Floridians we now have, which is astonishing.
That's right.
A lot's
That's right.
changed. I was born in 92. I'm 32 years old, and in my short lifetime, or medium lifetime, I guess, it's just crazy to see the growth. But I think that's why a lot of people are paying attention now is because the question of what are we growing into? How does it look for my children? How does it look for me towards the end of my career? I think a lot of people in Florida look at other states and they see kind of that end game. States that have grown, 25% constantly for the past few decades. States like Texas that has 30 million people or close to it. I think California has over almost 40 million people. A lot of those places have a lot of problems, traffic problems. There's a lot of different issues. And I think we have an opportunity in Florida to grow at least as maybe effectively as we can, right? Because we know the growth is coming.
Absolutely.
And so a lot of that comes with different ideas, different positions on issues and all that sort of stuff. But tell me about your origin story. Where are you from and then what inspired you to run for this office?
Absolutely. So I'm born and raised here in Tampa, which is very hard to find nowadays.
We're a rare breed.
We are a rare breed. Born and raised here and went to Middleton High School, class of 2014. And after graduating, I took a year off, and I won't get into the weeds of that all, but tried college out at Morehouse. Didn't work out for me. Was a prospect student to go to Harvard or Yale, actually. And ultimately, I was promised a full-ride scholarship at Morehouse, and board of trustee member completely reneged on everything. And so I moved back down Thanksgiving weekend of 2015. I thought, what do I do now? Working at the Apple store. And a friend of mine said, look, join the Air Force. And he said, you seem like an Air Force kind of guy. I'm thinking, okay, all right, what's the Air Force kind of guy?
What does that mean?
And ultimately, I ended up enlisting about a month or so later. So January 26, 2016. And I've been in the Air Force now going on 9 years. In January, It'll be, I enlisted as a biomedical technician. And then now I am a finance officer, first lieutenant out of MacDill Air Force Base. And through that process, just really built up my community engagement, right? Serving on multiple boards. At the age of 23, was appointed to serve on the Hillsborough Hospital Board. So we are the landlord for Tampa General Hospital.
Wow.
So I just finished my 4-year term there. I finished off as a board treasurer and just due to campaign, lifestyle, everything going on, so no longer serving there. But I still actively serve on the Boys and Girls Club of Tampa Bay Corporate Board. So we oversee 28 locations throughout the Bay Area, 22,000 students every year come through our campuses. Wow. And so that just goes to show you my engagement in the community I care deeply about. But how do we get involved in politics, all right? 2020 is when I started door knocking for Congressman Bilirakis. And from there, door knocking the different fundraisers and dinners. And that's how I met Senator Rick Scott and the governor and many, many others like in that realm of things. And in 2022, started door knocking for another congressional member, and it just kind of just spiraled from there. So last year is when we saw that there was an open seat for county commission. Originally got in there, outraised everyone on both sides of the aisle, and thought, wow, okay, wait a minute. Who the heck is this 27, well, actually I was 26 at the time, 26-year-old kid, black Republican come out of nowhere,
Yeah.
that just outraised everyone. And so that's when we looked and said, hey, we may have a great opportunity to run for the state house.
Wow.
And so I sat down with a lot of my support, and we ultimately made the switch. And here we are now running one heck of a race.
Wow.
And so that's the long story short. But if I can answer your true question, is I guess your next question would be, well, how did you become a Republican, or the ideology behind that? So if you like, I could answer that in detail.
Well, we can jump to that, but let me just say, first of all, Rico, thank you for your service to our military.
Thank you.
Number one, and number two, thank you for putting your name in the hat and joining the race for public service here locally and at the state level. We were talking before we went live about just this country and kind of how things have changed and shifted over the years, and how personally I found myself as a moderate Democrat, and the ideology of that party has shifted outside of where I stand. And we were kind of talking about how, don't subscribe yourself. I don't want to speak for anyone else. I'll just say me, right? For me, I don't want to put my name on a party. I want to stay true to my values and my morals, and where the party falls is maybe where I'll vote. But I don't like the idea in this country of, hey, it's one side or the other, and that's the only thing that matters. And we before we turned the mics on, we were talking about how you also kind of feel that way, where although you are running as a Republican, you do have these core values that you've stayed true to. So let's jump into that next question you had, is kind of how you found yourself as a Republican and what your true values are.
Absolutely. Stay true to your values, stay true to your morals. And I do believe in a thing called a moral compass.
Yeah.
And I think as long as that moral compass is pointed true north, you're going to stay there. And, speaking back to yourself, your moral compass has always stayed true north. But the politics of the world has changed around you, which now has deemed that you've now switched from a Democrat to now more of a conservative leaning, which is perfectly fine. But how I got to become a Republican actually is very interesting. I remember in 2008, and I'm watching Obama's inauguration. So I was actually in the 7th grade at the time, geography class specifically. And I remember every detail about that day because they had stopped the entire classroom, and I'm watching it and I'm crying. I have tears in my eyes. If he can do it, so can I, is what was going through my mind at the time. And you fast forward a couple years, and then right around the time the ACA was passed, shortly thereafter, my mom's healthcare insurance nearly doubled, and just for the two of us. And I thought, well, wait, what's going on here? But what brought my attention to it, my mom sat me down and said, hey, well, Christmas won't be so well this year. And I thought, why? I'm a straight A student. Well, because of insurance. And she kind of told me a little bit about it. And I thought, wait a minute, I thought he was for us. I felt so heartbroken in that time, right? And how it was impacting me personally, right? I want Christmas gifts, right? And impacting my family and my mom. And so from there, that's when in 2012, I thought, okay, hey, a guy by the name of Mitt Romney comes out of nowhere, right? And what he's talking about, tax cuts and this and that and prosperity, smaller government. I'm thinking, oh, that sounds pretty good. My grandmother said, nope, not in this household, right? We're Democrat, born and raised. And I thought, oh, okay, wow. And so then in 2013, I almost had a rebellion. I said, you know what? I'm going to register as a Republican. I'm 17 years of age, and I pre-registered. And I thought I did it. And at that time, it was more of just like a ha-ha. But then I grew into it very fast rapidly I grew into it, actually, because then in 2016, when I am now, a United States Airman, and there's one of the most pivotal elections to date in my life at that moment is between Trump and Hillary, and I remember specifically, love him or hate him, Donald Trump comes down the stairs at the time, and he did a speech, and he said, "What do you have to lose by voting Republican? All right,
Right.
You're unemployed, jobless, incarcerated. You've been going down this perpetual cycle for the last 60, 70 years or so. And it's always just been hey, we're going to promise you everything, but deliver on very little to nothing." And that's what I felt. And so when the Democratic Party was turning their back to me, the Republican Party had their arms open, right, and said, hey, we're going to embrace that. And I feel as though, regardless of affiliation, taking affiliation off, look at and stand for things like fiscal responsibility, public safety, right, looking at empowering, right, our young students in education, and taking away all this other fluff around it. Everyone wants to save some money, right? They want to work a good job, build up a retirement, right, and retire happy. That's really what it comes down to, and leave something for their offspring. But when you get all these other things mixed involved, it just mucks up the works. If you
Yeah.
will. Yeah.
Yeah, it does. And there's this weird thing in America where we've got on this train of uncontrolled spending. I don't know when it started. It probably started a lot long before you or I were around. Maybe this is like gold standard stuff coming out of the Great Depression or something
Yeah,
like that.
yeah.
But the earliest I remember of uncontrolled spending was during the recession. I was in high school, and they were talking about too big to fail, right? All these bailouts. Looking back, man, how do you deny that was a bad thing? I don't know the way around it. You had financial collapse, Bank of America going bankrupt. I think like Ford Motor Company was the only automobile company that didn't take a bailout from the United States government. Do you let all these companies fail and crash the entire economy and turn this country into a Great Depression round 2, or do you write those checks? We wrote the checks.
You wrote the checks.
And I think that mentality has snowballed, and you saw it during COVID too. And back to drawing those party lines, you have Trump in office during COVID. He's a conservative Republican. He ran as a Republican, and here he is writing everyone a check for $1,400. And all the PPE loans and all the money that's been printed and pumped into our economy. And that's the reason why we have inflation.
Yep. The QE as well, quantitative easing.
All of that.
All that, yeah.
And for me, I've realized, are we on a train that can't be stopped? I was talking also before the podcast, when we can dig into this a little bit, but offer transportation here locally. And also in the last couple decades, some of the more conservative people in office. Actually, it's only been Republicans as far as I can remember here in Florida, right? Who was the last Democrat? Was it Jeb Bush was Republican? Christ was Republican, right?
Wow.
Who was the last Democrat?
The last Democrat that I can think of, Bob Martinez.
Was a while ago, right? Wasn't that in the 90s?
The last one that I can think of. And it's funny enough because he was a Democrat, but then switched to Republican.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Bob Martinez. He was
That
governor,
back,
or
like,
he
I
was
think,
mayor of
80s, I
Tampa
believe.
too.
Yeah, he was mayor of Tampa. Yeah, wow, we're going back.
Long,
Yeah.
back. But the point is, right? So there was a bunch of $2 billion of funding that Republican administrations have pretty consistently denied here in Florida. On one side of it, you go, well, from a conservative standpoint, that's a good thing, because if we deny the funding, we don't have to match it. We're not on the hook to fix these freaking trains for the next 50 years, right? There is this like, hey, let's try to save our money ideology. But then you also see the stuff during COVID, and you also see certain handouts the states give, right? Where is the line drawn? And maybe this isn't even a policy position, but an ideological position on spending. Like, where do you stand on it?
Looking back at the constituency, that's what it's focused on. And ultimately, I think a lot of issues that are partisan and divisive, that are politically charged, shouldn't be.
Yeah.
Right. For example, something like healthcare, right, which is my background, and I've worked extensively in that field now, most of my time now, for my working years. In that is the simple fact of something like that shouldn't really be, partisan. If you look at children's education, right, that should not be a partisan issue.
Yeah.
I don't think anyone wants their child, right, being taught about, sexual gender ideology and all that kind of stuff from K through fifth grade or whatever. Right? First time ever hearing about something like that was when I was in the fifth grade, right? When you had your little sex ed class. But doing that to younger age groups is not okay, right? It's those kind of things where we go, can we subtract ourselves, right? The ideology from that, and just look at what is being a good human being, and focusing on the community issues is what it needs to be about at the very end of the day. And that's one thing and expertise that I can bring into in taking my leadership skills, having served now as an officer and leading teams in the Air Force, right, and serving on multiple boards that I've served on throughout the community and throughout the state, is the simple fact of I can bring, right, sound reason and good judgment to a lot of these hot button issues, to bring people to the table, That's what it's about.
Hmm.
And you have to have that now in such a polarized political landscape that we're in right now.
And no politician should be an expert in any one of these issues. You're
Yeah.
just not going to find it.
Yeah. And if someone says they are,
maybe
they
you
aren't.
do. Maybe you plug some politician that was the CEO of Tampa General Hospital, and,
Yeah.
and for healthcare, they know the exact plan. Okay, well, what are they going to do about the environment? What are they going to do about social issues? What are they going to do about healthcare and insurance
Yes.
and our road? I mean, there's a lot of things that need to be taken care of by the government in this country. Some may argue the government takes care of too much, right? Some argue maybe it's not enough, but to put a politician in a position, in an office, and expect them to be an expert in all of these fields is a little ridiculous.
Yeah.
And any politician claiming to be an expert,
Yes.
right, of all these things is also ridiculous. And
Watch out for 'em.
People should be wary of those people,
Yeah.
right? But I think you're totally spot on where it's like, hey, reason, leadership, the ability to bring people together, the ability to put the right people as their own individual experts in a position to advise that office on what to do.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's the most important thing
Yeah.
in government. That should change. I don't know that that's been the way in America. It seems like we've always gone for the more flashy popularity contest, and I'm going to fix this, and you're going to have. I remember in like elementary school, it was like, yeah, we're going to put the Kool-Aid in the water fountains. All the water fountains are going to be Kool-Aid. Like someone literally suggested that when I was in 5th grade. And that's what got the attention,
That's
right?
it.
And I think that in some weird way, our childish tendencies display themselves in these elections.
Oh my God, you hit it on the head.
You know,
Yeah.
it's kind of a weird, funny, sad kind of thing that's unfolded itself, and that it expresses itself in our clown show of a national election we have. You know, it's unfortunate we've stepped away from that kitchen table talk. What do Floridians want? You know, do we really want to muddy the water with social issues here in Florida when we have an insurance crisis, an affordability crisis, we have a transportation crisis, we have things we need to handle.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of those outside conversations are so distracting, they take away from the good conversations and the solutions that are there.
Yeah.
You just have to have someone, like you just said, be the person to bring those experts together.
Absolutely. And to that, so there's a few points I want to hit on. So I'll test out my listening skills here. Let's see. So the first point was the simple fact of don't subscribe yourself to some particular party and just hold that lifelong, right? If you think, because if you hold true to your morals, what you truly believe in, if you care about the community issues, then you may kind of shift in and out a little bit there. But what I really want to hit on is be an independent thinker. Okay.
Yep.
And that's what I bring forth in this election. Ultimately, second point is what you've seen with every politician out there, and even if you look at my opponent and many other people throughout the state and national politics, they're going to say, right, the headline slogan and whatever that yields, right, back to child. Ooh, you got the shiny carrot, right? The gold coin, and whoever has the biggest carrot, right, or the shiniest coin, oh my gosh, I'm going to just trend there. And you would make these outrageous claims just to be a partisan soundbite,
knowing you probably can't accomplish
knowing
those
you
things.
can't and you won't accomplish it. And people a lot of times on the campaign trail know it good and day that they will never in their 4, 8, 6 years, whatever the term, that they'll be able to accomplish that.
How many times have we been told that story?
Oh my gosh.
Seriously.
Yeah, time and time again. Well, look at what's happened on the Democratic side of things, right? The Black community particularly has been told that same every single time. But
For
guess
decades.
what? For decades, nothing ever comes about. And so, bringing it back on around. And so you look at, like right now, for example, yes, Florida, we have, a legislature and leadership that has focused on some of those social issues that has ruffled some feathers, okay? But on the same token, Florida has also delivered, right? When you look at our budget, Florida is having a $117 billion budget. We have currently about 14% of that in surplus, right? Nearly over $16 billion in surplus, right? To where we can weather the storm. We currently have a greater financial rating, credit score, than the U.S. government. We have a AAA rating right now. So you look at these kind of things and you go, wow, Florida's obviously doing something right.
Right.
And when you look at a lot of these key other states, right, during COVID, as we mentioned before, we weathered the storm, right? and you look at a lot of these other key states, right? Like New Jersey, New Hampshire, California, Illinois, right? Where their net e-migration are at record numbers. They have people in mass exodus, droves leaving, right? By the thousands, by the millions. And they're coming where? To states like Texas,
Right.
to states like Florida, like the Southeast, and that's where they're moving to. But guess what? Florida has 900 people a day on average right now moving here. And they're coming, a lot of them are coming here to Hillsborough in the Tampa Bay region.
I was thinking on the ride here about that and how maybe selfishly I wish we were shut down, because then we wouldn't have had this massive price escalation, inflation. I'm in real estate, so the appreciation of my property helps me, but it also inhibits me from purchasing other property and sustaining my business.
Yeah.
Inflation also hurts because insurance on this building. I've said the amount on this podcast like 5 times, so I'll spare everyone listening. But insurance is expensive. It's gone up probably 3x on some of these properties, and so there is a weird balance where it's like we are clearly, objectively, a shining light in America. We have a surplus. You have people in droves coming here from around the entire country. Other states that chose to go a different route, maybe states like California, they are in chaos.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't matter what you say. You can look for yourself and look online. I mean, I think from a numbers perspective and from a reality perspective, it's very clear that certain decisions made in Florida over the last 4 years since COVID have helped us economically in terms of the numbers. Attached to that is the challenge it brings. 900 people moving here a day, a budget surplus. Those things might sound great in a vacuum, but for Floridians like you and I that were born here, it's actually a kind of a negative.
Yeah.
I mean, we have more traffic. Things are more expensive for us. I just bought a home with my wife. It was probably at least 50% more expensive than it would have been had COVID not occurred and had we not done, air quotes, so well, right? So there is this balance with growth. Is it exciting? Of course. I mean, all these new buildings coming up in Tampa and the resurgence of our downtown and some of these projects, and yeah, man, it's cool and the budget's great. How do you balance that with the Floridians that live here?
Yes. So how do you balance that and not forgetting about the little man?
Yeah.
All right. That's ultimately the root of that question, is because we can experience this massive growth that you and I have seen coming up here. But the thing is, we need to make sure we keep it relative, right? And ultimately, it's looking at taking that surplus that we have, but passing those savings back to the common man, right? Through things like the ship and sale programs, right, for homeowners assistance, right, looking at providing tax breaks, right, to Floridians, like what we've done every year with our back to school program, where we provide tax breaks on a lot of items, right, even during the hurricane season, where we provide record tax breaks, right. You also look at, for example, roads and infrastructure. That is a hot button issue right now. And the one that a lot of people talk about is the offered transportation, right? And how we had a penny tax, and ultimately you had a former county commissioner who no longer lives here that pushed that to, and boom, it got struck down, and voters ultimately voted for it. And it was in the bill. But then here we are now, and it raised about money being dispersed. It was about $589 million. Nearly $500 million, actually a little more than $500 million. But now that money has been litigated on, and the legislature has now decided that we're going to have a sales tax holiday. They're currently, which links went out, have been going out over the past few weeks, a refund program if you have your receipts, or you can just get a flat $100. And then outside of that, then they also put money actually towards roads, but not what was intended. Right.
So out of the 500 million, though, I mean, can you actually try to look that up, Tyler, how much money it exactly was? I think you're right, Rico, because I saw the same thing. I think it was like $500 million.
Yeah. I'll tell you right now.
But I think the problem is they're going to figure out a way to spend the money one way or the other. It's not going to go back in our pockets, and I highly doubt it's all going to go to Hillsborough County.
Yeah. So the thing is that they were going to pass that money to the Florida Department of Transportation, and then we, Hillsborough County, would submit our in the military, call it a
UFR. That gets me a little passionate, Rico. It really does.
Yeah, we would submit our unfunded requests, right, to the FDOT, And then they would dictate, okay, yeah, we're going to do this, and that. It's like, no, give that money back to us here in Hillsborough.
What's the guy's name? White?
Oh, yeah, Stacey White.
Stacey
commissioner
White.
that led that. Yeah.
And where does he live now? Tennessee, Alabama, not in Florida.
Not in Florida. So if I may, so of that $589 million, only $256 million went to Hillsborough County for resurfacing projects, or allocated for Hillsborough County. $170 million for processing tax refunds, like I talked about earlier, and then also attorney fees, and then $162 million for a sales tax holiday. That's the breakdown.
So we vote as a community to tax ourselves because we see a hole in our society, and the hole is transportation. We need transportation. Now, what that looks like, we would have probably figured out. Probably building roads, probably extending, the trolley, some sort of a regional plan for transportation. They stole the money. I mean, that's a strong word to use, but in my opinion, they stole the money and now they're repurposing it for something else. And we as taxpayers paid for it. A lot of it, I think 20 or 30% probably came from visitors. I think a lot of it is from tourism as well.
I'm glad you said that. Nearly, even right now here in Tampa, nearly 30 cents of every dollar comes from a tourism.
Someone that doesn't live in here, which is
either international, out of state.
Which really is like the golden ticket that Florida has that a lot of states don't have. It's the reason we have 0% state income tax. It's the reason why we get to enjoy a lot of those things is because we have an unbelievable amount of people that visit Florida, and they're in the hotels and they're in the restaurants, and people are honking at them in traffic, and they're always cutting me off. And, but the beautiful thing about that is it provides our state and our localities with so much good money. But again, very disappointing that, hey, the voters saw a pinch. We voted for something, and I don't know if it was a group or Mr. White or who's to blame for that. But pretty damn shameful. We have strong transportation issues here in Hillsborough County. Without offer transportation, another way. How do you see the transportation problem being alleviated in terms of funding? I think the big issue throughout this podcast and talking with all these people I've found is the money piece. I think the money piece is the most challenging. So how do you see it?
First, I would say voting for someone like myself to get in office that can actually be a voice that can go into the majority in Tallahassee and actually appropriate dollars and bring back the bacon for this community. The incumbent can't do that, unfortunately. And if she and she has brought back some dollars, but not like what she could bring back if you could actually reach across the aisle and get things done, right? And when a majority of your bills die every single session in committee, that's an issue. You're a figurehead and you aren't able to actually get things done, right? And everyone talks about, taking away freedoms and all this and all that. No, we're not. The Republicans don't want to take away your freedoms. The Republicans want to ensure that those freedoms stay in place, right? And that you can live in a state that you can thrive, right? Not only spiritually, economically, right? Physically, you name it. And so at the end of the day, what you need to do is get out and vote, because ultimately I'm able to go in to the legislature, being able to appropriate money back for the community in record numbers, by the way, and being able to actually get laws on the House floor for a vote and getting it done, and reaching out and using my current network and then my extensive network that I will gain to being able to get people to the table to focus on the real community issues. That's how you do that. But a little further, if I may, is look at reallocating pots of money. Florida just, I think we put about $15 billion or so this last fiscal year appropriated for roads, right, and infrastructure all throughout the state, mind you. And obviously, Hillsborough, Tampa region got a good chunk of that completely separate from the office transportation money that was obviously then appropriated back. But my counterparts, two of my endorsers, right, current state representatives, they each received about $60+ million for their districts that are like that quasi, suburbs and rural mix, right, just like my district as well. I could be able to bring back that kind of money.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, the current rep can't and has not, right? These are the things we got to focus on. Looking at the Hillsborough indigent care tax that we currently have, we have about over $400 million sitting liquid right now in that. It is actually a program that provides free to heavily subsidized insurance for the indigent, right? And the impoverished in Hillsborough County. But guess what? We aren't spending that money. We're bringing in more every year over year than we are spending it, right? There's a couple of things we could look at. Either lowering the requirements to get in, all right, and allowing more people to receive those services, or looking at reappropriating half of that fund or a chunk of that fund for things like infrastructure and roads, right?
Yeah.
These are the different innovative ways and thoughts that we need to approach.
And the incumbent is not being able to source those funds, or not being able to get bills passed, or being roadblocked for whatever reason. Mm-hmm. Do you believe that's a personal? Is that a person's effectiveness being compromised, or is that the way the system works issue in terms of there's Republicans and the Democrats, and they're always fighting and nothing gets done? Like, what do you believe?
No, I don't believe that at all, because even prior to being selected, all right, as the minority leader, if you will. Well, actually, she is. I mean, wasn't able to bring, and a lot of those same bills, died in the committee. But taking it a step back, let's just look at the yield. And I'm going to give some credit where it's due here.
Okay.
Right? Serving in that position is illustrious, and it is an honor, right? In that position, you think that you would be able to bring your entire delegation of 35 members or 36 members or so across the aisle and actually say, let's focus on some kind of a partisan legislation, something that we can get done. And let's actually work with the chairman of appropriations, and let's work with these different leaders to actually get things done. But instead of that, it's pointing the finger.
Yeah.
And it's saying, oh my God, look at what they're doing. They're bad. They're racist. They're this, they're that. That's not the way we get things done. People, including myself and everyone that I talked to, I'm out door knocking. They're sick and tired of the partisan sound bites, the divisive politics. Focus on the community kitchen table issues.
Yeah.
Simple. That's what we need to get back to. And she yields a lot of power to be able to do that, but she has not done that. And that is why I'm running.
The Florida. Okay, Florida's been in the middle of it, right? Florida, unfortunately, has, the don't say gay thing. And a lot of these political issues are social issues that have been pointed at Florida. Look at Florida. I mean, I was just talking to my buddy, Frank. Frank's been on the show a bunch of times. He's from New York. Okay, when he goes back home, I live in Florida. They're like, what? Florida? A bunch of crazy alligator wrestling, homophobic people live in Florida. Like, the media has pinned Florida as a horrible place on social issues. The incumbent, right, the Democrats, have the entire ecosystem of the media, and frankly, a lot of larger states, millions of people support Florida, Florida. It's probably easy for the Democrats in Florida to take that stance and not work with the Republicans. They got the whole country behind them, right?
And you know why? It's because they're subscribing, right, to a political ideology in a party instead of actually being a forward thinker and saying, hey, let's focus on our constituency.
It's not good. It's not good at all, because it takes so much away from the actual issues at play.
Yeah.
And I understand how that could be intoxicating as a Democrat at the state level when you have the entire, what seems like, at least the media machine, and a lot of the political will in this country is against Florida and all the issues we have.
Yeah.
So I understand it. I understand why they play that game. But man, we got some issues we got to work through, and we'll never solve them by focusing on those the social ones.
Exactly. I mean, hey, okay, so I'm just going to mention two names here, and I'm not sure if people stand. They can love him or hate him, right? But Gus Bilirakis, U.S. Congressman, he's been in now for 16 years or so. Even when the House was controlled by Democrats, guess what? He was still getting things done, still getting money appropriate. You know why? He reached across the aisle. You look at State Senator Darrell Rouson, the same exact thing. Right, he's been in office now. He did 8 years as a state representative, and now he's done so far 6 years as a state senator. But guess what? He has been able to be bipartisan and reach across the aisle and get things done, and that is why he's effective. Okay, that's what it is about.
How big is that piece for you?
It's huge. It's huge.
Critical.
I mean, it's critical. It's actually paramount. It is the most important part. We have to be of sound mind. You have to be of an open mind, being able to say, hey, what can we get done here? Because if you were to date back, even like as a kid, right? Okay, don't you remember watching the Romney-Obama presidential debate? And they actually had grace.
Right.
And they were like, "Oh, Mr. President, oh, Mr. Governor," like, and they would. I mean, it was like, wow, they
Yeah.
actually get along, right? And who cares? It could have just been for the show and
Yeah.
behind doors or whatever. It could have been saying whatever they wanted to. But guess what? In the American public eye, they were always respectful to one another, right? They would agree to disagree.
It was a
We've
dialogue,
lost that.
and it was a well thought out conversation about the issues at play. And
Thank you.
unfortunately, we've veered so far away from that. We're shooting this. What's today? The 7th, the 8th. I think it's the 9th, right, of September. Tomorrow is the Trump-Kamala debate.
Yeah.
And I have a feeling a lot of the issues are going to get skipped over for political ones that we're talking about. Do you believe, and it's not like Republicans are completely outside of what we're discussing. I think the problem lies certainly on both sides of the aisle.
Mm-hmm.
Do you believe that certain individuals get intoxicated with the latter of it? Oh, I'm going to be I'm going to be a state rep, and then I'm going to be maybe a senator or a United States congressperson, or maybe I want to run for governor. Do you think they stay in the box to go up the ladder?
Yeah.
Like what would the motivation be to not work with the other side? I don't care if you're Republican or Democrat. Why wouldn't you want to get things done for the people here in Florida? That's who matters.
Yeah.
Party doesn't matter. The people in Florida matter.
Absolutely. I think the time where you would say, "Hey, I don't want to work with the left or work with the right, whatever side you're on." The time, and I'll tell you, the time that I wouldn't want to work with the opposite side is
Okay.
when I know it is going to go against my constituency and it's going to hurt my people back home. Okay, or when I know it completely, violates what I stand for and what I know what is in the best interest, right, of my citizens. That's when I say, heck no, it won't go, right? But ultimately, you have to be PC people. And here's the thing. We get so caught up in that lens is that when you serve as a state official, when you serve as a federal official, whatever the case may be, you are sworn in, right, to protect and defend and uphold the Constitution of the United States, Constitution of Florida, right, and ultimately be a servant, right? And what happens is we go and think, oh, well, I'm just going to be a servant only to my Republican base or a servant only to my Democratic base, right? That's where we've gone such array, right? Because ultimately you're serving every person, Democrat,
Everybody.
Independent,
And all the people
Republican.
that did not vote for you as well.
Exactly.
It's a big problem in the country. I don't know how it all plays out. This could be a 4-hour podcast on these specifics, Let's talk about some of your personal beliefs, though. We did talk a little bit about some issues, but let's dive kind of back a little bit into insurance. In my opinion, insurance is at the top of the list of these issues. Insurance has escalated in a very dramatic way, and we spoke before we went live about. That's part of the nature of Florida. I mean, we do live in a tropical environment. We get hammered every year by hurricane season. It's just the reality. We have low-lying areas that are subject to flooding and storm surge. So it's not like it's an issue that is going away. But we also both talked about how Florida is in a unique circumstance outside of different states because of that geography, because of our natural environment. What are some solutions, not that you have all the answers, but where do you see some of the Band-Aids, at least temporarily and moving forward, helping with the insurance crisis here in Florida?
Yeah. Well, let's just tell you where we've come from.
Yeah.
Kind of where we are now and then where I see us going as a state ultimately. Where we come from is we were the complete wild, wild west here in Florida. Okay. We accounted for nationally 9% of all homeowners insurance claims, right, in the country. But however, we accounted for 78% of all fraud and litigation claims in the homeowners insurance market. Okay. Something was obviously broken there. And so what did we do? We said, let's go to the drawing board, right? The Republican majority went to the drawing board. And if you listen to many others on the left, they're going to sit here and point the finger, but we actually made great strides. we passed legislation this past cycle in 23 actually, and then another one in 24. First one was a mass reform, right, to homeowners insurance and CPI, citizens property insurance, to where now it removed things like assignment of benefits, right? It now imposes fines and penalties for individuals to come and predatorily, right, say, hey, because you have, PAs, public adjusters, go through and, oh, yeah, but we got some shingles missing and we'll take care of it all in house, et cetera, right? And, got rid of the one-way attorney fees and things of that nature, right? These are what, some things that we addressed and fixed. And then this last cycle, we addressed E&S, which is excess and surplus. So now we have excess and surplus takeouts to ultimately depopulate citizens property insurance that will allow for these certain companies to solicit now individuals who don't have, and just specifically was wrote into the bill to where it would not hurt Floridians and homeowners here in the state of Florida, is that if you're homesteaded, right, it wouldn't happen. You couldn't get touched, okay, because you're safe, right? Your home is safe, you're homesteaded. But ultimately, it would go to places that had, and individuals who weren't homesteaded here and that had 2 and 3 dwellings, right? A lot of these multi-million-dollar homes and coastal properties and beachfront, et cetera.
Which there's a lot of here in Florida.
Which there's a lot of. And a lot of them, what were happening is they were going and getting, right, I think it's the 3 declinations or 2 declination letters saying, and then, oh, look at that, there's no market for it, when really there was. And we're going to run over here to CPI. CPI has to cover us. CPI's rates are about 40% or so lower than the actual market. So guess what? We're subsidizing that now as taxpayers of Florida, right? That's another reason why our insurance rates were up. So now with the passage of that, we can now depopulate citizens, right? Which will pass savings back on. This past year, we've seen an 8% reduction in premiums, right, on average throughout the state. But we also had the recommitment of insurance companies now, 3 major ones, State Farm, AAA, and then one more. So these are some of the things that we're looking at. And then we have more companies recommitting now to Florida as well. And so here's the thing. I've met with nearly every major player with different industries all throughout the state because I want to be well-versed on the issues and how the heck we can tackle it, right? So going into the next legislative cycle, we're going to obviously reassess and see where we are. But then ultimately, let's look at something like taking on a whole new thought around insurance, possibly separating roofing from dwelling, okay? And that'll most likely be for like and I talked it out and I thought about it, and I did speak to some executives about it. It would help depopulate CPI, but mainly affect more of that higher net worth individual in the short term. And then we have to look at ways that we can help subsidize, right, for your common folk. But at the end of the day, depopulating CPI helps everyone out ultimately. So these are just some of the things that I brainstorm on and I talk about with people. Yeah.
And there's also too, right, like the private sector, right? These companies are in business to make money. They're not in business to help us. I mean, there's great companies out there. There's fantastic leadership in the private sector. And a lot of them care. Most of them care. Vast majority care. But at the end of the day, it's a private company. Yeah. And they need to make business decisions that sustain themselves first and profit first versus help the people. The government's job, the people are the boss and the consumers on the government side of things. So that balance is a tricky one where maybe the insurance companies are wanting to go a certain direction, but then the people in Florida, hey, we can't extend that far for whatever reason. It'll hurt us. Yeah. Finding that balance is probably the trickiest part of the insurance deal because insurance is not public, right? I mean, it explains Citizens, by the way, because Citizens is a government-funded insurance company in Florida, or how does that exactly work?
Government-backed.
Okay.
So it's a government-backed insurance company, but Citizens was started with the true intent of being a last resort, right? To be
like an emergency safety net policy.
If no one else is covering me and I just truly have a completely out of whack situation with homeowners or obviously in terms of not being able to afford the average marketplace, then you could run the CPI. Right, that's what it was set for. But because under actually, I believe it was Charlie Crist, they set legislation that said, oh, you can only do X number of percent increase. So what happened is then year over year, right, as the market grew, right? And you just had this huge delta disparity between both what CPI's premiums were versus what the actual market was. And so now everyone said, well, crap, we got
That's
to
a
run
good
the
deal
CPI.
over there.
That's a great deal. And then what
Right.
was happening is when it was set, when that was also set, it also had a unintended consequence of increased fraud, right? Oh, because you know that there was a market, like for example, ENS, there has always been a market for that. But yet, oh, we're going to just go and see if we can just get this declination letter, and I'm going to purposely run to companies that I know won't cover me just so I can get that, so I can run the CPI, right? These are the kind of things that we're focused on. And so, you look at things like that. You have the Office of Insurance Regulation, right, OIR, that actually sets what the rate will be in the surplus there, because the insurance company like a Heritage or whoever, they can't just come out here and just gouge you to death, right?
Right.
There is a set limit, and that's where, back to your point, Garrett, about that fine balance, because it's like you don't want to have too much government overreach,
Right.
but you got to have just enough. Right?
Well, something I was going to say is too, you probably wouldn't want to Obamacare the insurance industry, meaning, hey,
No.
everyone has to only have citizens insurance. Then you've got the wealthy paying an insane amount of money.
There you go.
Subsidizing probably wouldn't even help the poorest of our
Yeah.
people in Florida. But I did want to talk to you about that briefly, just in terms of like ideas, right? Florida's so unique from an insurance perspective. We have more waterfront property here than any other state, probably by God, 5-10-fold. It's got to be, right?
Yeah.
All of our
Yeah.
coasts are filled with condo buildings.
Yeah.
So it is a unique situation. What if there was a government insurance program like Citizens? Again, Obamacare for insurance. I have a feeling that would not be good. I have a feeling it would have the same effect as it did for healthcare.
Mm-hmm.
You kind of have to let the private sector come in and assess risk and do what they need to do.
Yes.
But I also believe, hey, we shouldn't let insurance companies turn their back on Florida.
Mm-hmm.
Wasn't that another big reason why Citizens had this windfall of properties to insurers? Because a lot of insurance companies said, we ain't insuring in Florida.
They were insolvent. They were either going insolvent or there was a mass exodus out of the state. That's what was happening. And so that's ultimately how, pretty much overnight, if you will, Citizens just grew their portfolio like tenfold. You're like, oh my God, now what do we do? And so you have to be able to incentivize, right? The right incentives for these insurance companies to say, hey, how do we retain that marketplace and how do we attract new markets, right? New insurance companies that then come here and say, hey, Florida's open for business. And that's what we have done and strive to do as the Republican delegation. But taking it a step further from there is the simple fact of you don't want to be beholden and say, oh, let's socialize our insurance marketplace, because if you do that, right, it cripples, right? Obviously, private innovation, private investment is going to cripple that, and ultimately the likes of what we have seen with Obamacare when it comes to healthcare, because then that is a second beast that we then have to tackle, right? We'll talk about later, I'm sure, but ultimately it's going to stifle growth, and then you will have, leading back to where we just came from, a mass exodus of companies saying, hey, if you're going to set price controls, if you're going to tell me what I can and can't cover, et cetera, boom, I'm out of here.
Right.
Or,
because they have the freedom to go work in other states.
They have the freedom to work in other states. And they go, oh, well, you know what? You're a high risk anyways, right? Or the
see ya.
margins are too thin. Because guess what? I have a good margin now because I don't have that set price control. You do something like that, oh my God. Or if you mandate that, oh, well, every Floridian living in a certain zip code here, whatever has to, that's another thing, government overreach. And then
And to add to that too, like another scenario that would be horrible is a crisis scenario. We talked earlier about the bailouts. Well, what the hell happens if we're all on Citizens and we get a major, Hurricane Andrew event that comes through, blows out Miami, crosses the state, also hits Tampa, and you've got this incredible amount of damage. By the way, very possible.
Yes.
We have a hurricane season every year.
Yeah.
Might not happen this year, might not be next year, but who knows, right?
Yeah.
I think our risk is too thin if one company, especially a government company, was to subsidize insurance in Florida. It just seems like a recipe for disaster. We probably do want more companies rather than less to spread that risk thinner.
You're a smart man, right? So you would never, in the brightest days, say, hey, I'm just going to sell my real estate portfolio tomorrow, and I'm just going to go dump all of it in the S&P 500, 90% of it in S&P 500, and I'll leave 10% in commodities and whatever, or mix of that in cash. People will call you crazy, All right. It's the same thing we're looking at right now with citizens property insurance, right? We don't want to have an overpopulation and they account for what, 56% or so of the market here in Florida? That's absurd because we're over leveraged on one side. You never want to be over leveraged or you have to diversify your portfolio, all right? And that's what we're looking at here is that how do we incentivize and attract new companies, new business to come here, depopulate that, less burden on the state, right? We can pass those savings and continue to grow that surplus and pass those savings back down to Floridians.
Well, I think in the same way, our healthcare crisis, so, we talked about Obamacare and all that sort of stuff. And, we have a sick country. Our people are overweight. Our diet is horrible. We don't drink enough water. We don't walk enough. We're stuck in a car getting fast food in general.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't help the healthcare system. And in the same way, not promoting good development, not promoting, hey, buy that old house in a flood zone, build it up to code above the flood zone. That'll make the insurance companies more comfortable with providing policies here in Florida.
Mm-hmm.
I believe the root of the issue is properties that don't fare well during storms. What was the hurricane? I think it was Hurricane Michael that hit the Panhandle like 5 years ago, 6 years ago.
I think it was
hammered up in Tallahassee and in the Panhandle area, and we did it. My wife and I, girlfriend at the time, did a road trip out west, and driving through across I-10, you could see the damage. Pine trees snapped in half. It was pretty crazy. It was horrible. Yeah. Interestingly, in the beach towns, you could see a ton of damage on these older buildings that were built in the 60s and 70s. We had a condo boom in the 70s. We have a lot of older condominiums here in Florida. Yeah. The new construction fared fantastic. The hurricane impact windows, all block. The buildings kind of looked good. I mean, I hate to say that, but like you drive through the area, everything's destroyed, and you have these structures that were built with current codes faring very well. I would imagine insurance companies would love to see that. They're probably much more eager to write policies on a building that's newer built with hurricane code windows and all that sort of stuff. I think the root of the problem is we have a lot of old buildings and flood zones here in Florida, especially here in Tampa Bay.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
All these old bungalow houses made out of wood in flood zones.
Through the Ybor district,
all that.
Old historic districts.
I think getting to the root of the issue and actually incentivizing coastal high hazard development. A lot of people have, especially here locally, have said we don't want any more development in coastal high hazard areas, and I totally understand that. But wouldn't we want to promote good, at least redevelopment in terms of there's a house, tear it down, build a new house? I'm not talking about building a building where a house was. I'm talking about just redeveloping a place. Yeah. Doesn't that make a lot of sense? Like, wouldn't that help the insurance crisis if we had less older flood zone properties and we had more built up code properties?
Yeah. Not only redevelopment to that degree, but also reinforcing what we currently have.
Yeah.
Going through reinforcing our shorelines, right? Look at, for example, and this is a great example. Last Thursday, was it? When we had 3.8 inches of rain?
Yeah.
But yet, Bayshore, I mean, it's just flooded. There were like 15 cars stranded. I'm driving home from work, and I'm thinking, oh my God, what is this? All right?
Yeah.
Those kind of things. Again, back to reinforcing our infrastructure.
Yes.
Reinforcing our shorelines.
Yeah.
Right? Tampa General Hospital, they do it every couple of years. They're back dredging and reinforcing, and it's a fortified tower, right?
Yeah.
Those kind of things we need to look at doing all along our shorelines, and that's why you have programs. I believe it is the SHIP program. I know you have SHIP and you have SAIL, but one of them specifically program is one that if you want to go through and the legislature enacted this a few years ago, and that I think it's nearly dollar for dollar up to I think like $10,000 or $15,000 or something. You want to get windows or whatever, like you're able to do all of that and receive a credit back from Florida. Isn't that phenomenal?
It's
right?
Fantastic.
It incentivizes you to want to go through and reinforce your home and update these kind of critical pieces of infrastructure throughout the home. That's what we have to look at.
Right.
And like I said before, with the budget that we have now being very fiscally sound, we could up the ante and increase that. And that's what we actually did this past legislative cycle.
I think that's the biggest piece of this whole thing. I think this country has an interesting habit of throwing money at things and look at the issue from top down. And there is a lot of work to be done at the top with these insurance companies, and we talked about that.
Yeah.
But I also believe a more effective way to combat some of these issues is from the very bottom, like we're talking about. reinforcing infrastructure to help accommodate these storms. Okay, the storms are coming, right? It's like,
Yeah.
We're going to have hurricanes the rest of our lives and
Yeah.
for generations to come, right? Knowing that, is it the smartest idea to only focus on the insurance? Well, probably not. It's probably much more smarter to work on some of these pumps the city's been putting in place and the county's been putting in place, more areas for mangrove to block some of that storm surge, right? Better action plans when there is a storm. Like all of those base level foundation things, in my opinion, would make insurance carriers more comfortable about having policies here in Florida, because they go,
Yes.
hey, Florida's got that down. Like, is Florida risky because of the storms? Yes, but the government and the locals have made it very clear that they want to live in Florida. They're not going to move away because of these storms, but they've made a dedication to create a better environment when the storms do come. And I'm talking everything. I'm talking better evacuation plans,
Yeah.
more funding for these coastal areas like you talked about. I think kind of a bottom-up approach makes a lot of sense regarding insurance.
Yeah. And Florida has done and taken great strides in conservation and restoration programs of our, wetlands and our shoreline, properties and whatnot. And so when you look at that, it's a holistic approach, right? It's going to take the reinforcement, it's going to take the conservation efforts, it's going to take the insurance, it's going to take all of that, right? And the infrastructure, right? And ultimately, I think that's when you get the holistic package and you go, hey, now we can fix that issue. Now let's jump to the next. But I'll tell you one thing. I know that I go into the legislature, I will not be able to fix every single issue in my 8 years in office. But you know what? I'm going to take great stride. And I can be able to come out and say, oh my God, wow, Rico did a pretty darn good job and was actually able to address the issues, the key issues right now. And what's on the ballot that we have coming up is just going to open up another Pandora's box of more issues.
Well, I totally agree. And also just the growth. I mean,
Yeah.
we're
Yeah.
expected to have, I think, 30 million people. I think it was 30 million people by the end of the decade, or maybe it was 30 million people by 2050. I think that's what it was. So the people are coming, and that's going to come with problems.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
whatever problems we don't solve now are going to be exacerbated in the future.
Absolutely.
Everything gets more complicated. And I think, on the offer transportation, because we didn't get that funding and work on some of these issues in the last few years since we've collected that money, well, guess what? Inflation, now it's even harder. Had we spent $300 million 5 years ago, that would have went a lot farther than $300 million today. And I think problems don't necessarily get worse, but they get complicated with time and with people and with money, right?
Yeah.
And so for that reason, I believe that Florida is in its most pivotal point in its timeline.
Yes.
You can look at other states that have had amazing growth trajectories for the decades past, like California and Texas and New York and all these places. You can also look at states that have gone down in population for decades, and cities like Detroit and some of these Rust Belt cities. We can look at other markets and see the ebb and the flow and the trajectory and how things have played out one way or the other. We have a lot of good information to go on because of that here in Florida.
That's right.
But I do believe this is not just a regular point in our history. I think we are in a pivotal point. Talk about that, Rico. First of all, do you recognize that? And then second of all, kind of how do you see where we are at in our timeline in Florida?
Yeah. I think Florida, I think we're still in, and I say this with tongue in cheek, but I think we're still in our infancy, really.
Yeah.
When you look at where we can be and where we will be in the next 20 to 30 plus years, right? Florida right now, if we were our own country, our own sovereign nation, okay, we'd be the 15th largest in the world by GDP, okay? We have about a $1.7 trillion impact, right? That is phenomenal when you think about that. I mean, when you think about all the countries, there are 187 countries, I believe, in the world. Yeah, we'll be 15th largest. But taking it a step further, by the year 2030, everything goes well, we're on target to be the 10th largest, okay? And up to the reins of, really, topping some of those, states like California, Texas, New York, et cetera. And so when you think about that, that is massive growth. That is massive investment here in Florida, and ultimately is going to be happening here in the Tampa Bay region as well. But when I want to bring it back home to just Tampa Bay, because we are very much in our infancy when you compare it to like cities like Orlando, if you look at it, obviously Miami, right? I'm telling you right now, as Tampa as we are right now, we are where Miami was like 15 years ago.
Right.
And I tell you one thing, everything rises and falls under leadership. And if we don't have the right ones in office and we don't have the good forward thinkers, we're going to screw ourselves up.
Right.
And we will be on the regress instead of continuing to progress.
Yeah, I'm so aligned with that. And that's kind of what I was describing, right? Like it's not like looking at those numbers as only a positive thing. There's a scenario where the wrong actions are taken, the wrong leadership is in place, where, yeah, we have a population of 30 million in 2050. Yeah, we are the 10th largest economy in the world, but what does it look like for the people that live here?
Absolutely.
Because California can say that same thing, and they do, Newsom gets, we're the third biggest, we're bigger than Japan in terms of, it's like, okay, right, great. The numbers are cool, but what does it look like for the people that live there? What does it look like for the common man? What does it look like for a family? What does it look like? What does it look like for everyone? The people at the top, the very wealthiest Floridians, are they being incentivized in the proper ways? People need to understand that those people do great things. They have jobs and businesses, and they pay a hell of a lot of money in taxes to live here. And if you lose that base of people, it hurts all of us. And you've seen that exact thing happen in California. They've lost that high net worth tax base.
Yes.
Now they have a lot of money going out. They really can't afford to keep it up. They're being subsidized by the federal government. A good thing can go bad, I guess is what I'm saying.
It can go bad quickly.
It can go bad very quickly.
And you can, and the thing about that is, everyone thrives, and it talks about how Florida thrives on the, no state income tax. All right. But here's why that's a good thing, because you have no state income tax that drives growth.
Yeah.
And revenue in other areas like business tax, sales tax, for example, e-commerce taxes, et cetera, is one less burden on us right now. And then, you have one of our presidential candidates who is talking about doing a complete, 100% increase or so to our capital gains tax. I mean, it's absurd, right?
Yeah.
You look at these kind of things, and Florida, we just lowered. Actually, it was from 4.75, I believe, down to 2.2% or 2.25% for our corporate lease tax, our business lease tax. That's a good thing, because now we're going to attract businesses not only to stay here but to grow.
That's right.
And the revenue is going to come.
And you're already seeing it in practice. You're seeing companies come here because of those sort of things.
Because of those sort of things.
You're seeing companies and individuals be incentivized to move to Florida, bring their money, bring their business with them. That's good for all of us.
It's good for all of us. And the opponent, the opposition to that would say, oh, well, you're cutting it, and how can we just keep cutting taxes? Because all Republicans are about cutting taxes, but how does the money come back? All right. Well, look at our budget. All right. I mean, for any naysayer, even my opponent, they say that the headline to be the partisan soundbite, but look at the budget, right? The money comes back. And ultimately, because we are attracting, right, new markets, we're attracting new individuals, new businesses to come here and do business in the state of Florida, right? That's why we have thriving ports. That's why we have thriving tourism, right? That's why we have thriving economy here. But the ultimate thing is that can be all great. But back to your point, Garrett, is that how do we then pass that down to the common man? And ensuring that you have the right legislature, right, that are passing the laws that people actually care about.
Yeah, people can't get lost in the sauce, so to speak. Who are the legislators, right? They can't be enamored by these numbers and then pretend like the numbers are the metric. That's not the metric.
Yeah.
The metric is the people of Florida, especially the people that have lived here their entire lives. It's been very, very frustrating. I've had a lot of growing pains in my personal life and in business because of all the influx of people. I'm an optimist. I'm a positive guy. I see it as a good thing. And I also believe it was inevitable. I believe that all of the growth we've had, we would have had by the end of the decade. COVID accelerated things.
It
they
exacerbated
took
it.
Let's just say an 8-year timeline and crunched it into 2. I think that's exactly what happened. But a good thing can go bad. And I think that the way we can hedge our bet is to provide a good environment here in Florida with those incentives you just talked about. Some of those lower corporate taxes, continuing our 0% state income tax. The federal government's going to do what they're going to do, and whoever wins in November, I have a feeling, even if it's Trump, we're going to have to keep shelling out money.
Oh yeah.
There's things on an international scale that are more complicated than we can dig into today, and people are very frustrated at the $100+ billion going to overseas to Ukraine and all the other money and the wars we're involved in and military bases around the globe. There's arguments on both sides of that. But the idea that the federal government is going to reduce their spending by 15-20%, and then, oh, we can do it if we want in Florida. No. We need to focus on Florida. We need to continue to provide good incentives, because if we don't, the federal government is going to keep spending. And if we put ourselves in a high tax position, we're not going to attract those wealthy people. We need those people to move here to keep sustaining our economy.
We need that. And one of my priorities going into office is, how do we wean ourselves off of the federal government's teat? Okay. That's what it comes down to. Because nearly, if I'm not mistaken, I think it is almost about 30-something percent, 38% or so of our budget. Probably not that much, probably 30 to 32% of our budget. It comes from federal subsidies. All right, either through transportation.
That's a lot, man.
Through healthcare, through education, you name it, right? We receive all the different pools of money for different sectors of the government. Yeah, that's a lot of money. And think about this. If the federal government tomorrow, God forbid, were to just say, boop, we got to cut off the spigot, man. That's it. We're drowning ourselves. Then what? All right, the entire country just turns upside down, because a lot of states, not just Florida, but a lot of states, and there's actually states that are even worse than that in terms of the delta, right? The debt to income ratio, if you will, completely upside down. But at least here in Florida, we're fiscally sound, and we are. And my goal is that we can then, right, be self-reliant and independent, right? So we can be energy independent, right? We can be, economically independent, right? All these different types of, sectors that we can then say, hey, we can foot ourselves, we can foot the own bill, all right? That's what I strive forward to, because at the end of the day, everything that we do here, and when you look at things like, Medicaid expansion, et cetera. Medicaid expansion, for example, and that's a hot topic issue. It's not based on expansion status. If you look at the reimbursement structure, it's actually based on expenditure, not expansion status. And so when you look at that, it's the simple fact of, we can go and run to the government for more dollars, but that all attributes back to an increased national debt. How do we reach out to the private sector and drive, healthcare innovation? All right. How do we ensure that we can drive down rates? Let's reach out, and look at things like, GME credits, right? The interstate mobility bill that was just passed, 1600, where we're attracting, right, fresh, right, young and ideas to come here, to work here, and to provide the coverage, and the healthcare that we need. And all these things are in tandem, right? Because whenever you do something, you're going to have secondary, tertiary, and quaternary effects, because of that. But that's where I'm looking at. How do we keep Florida, right, to be fiscally sound and responsible, pass down the savings to our average day citizen, but continue to slowly wean ourselves off of the federal government subsidies?
And California can't have this conversation at all, because they're so far down that road.
Yeah.
They can't live without the federal government.
No.
They've taken so much money from the feds, and they've lost so much of their tax base that they can't sustain themselves on their own. And what a bad position to be in for someone who lives in California, a regular taxpayer in California. What a scary position.
Yeah. And you know what? And if I may interject really quickly, and that is the reason why politics are so polarized, because then guess what? Now we got to play good with whoever's in office, because
right. And then you're continuing down that path.
You're beholden to whoever the president is, or whatever the budget that gets pushed through Congress.
Well, I guess we got to fall in line. We're not going to get the money to pay for the services we need. I mean, what a horrible position to put your state in.
Absolutely.
I don't know if I've ever heard a politician specifically talk about that like you have, and you put it really well, where it's like, do we want to be reliant on the federal government, or should we look at the federal government like almost like a support system?
Yeah.
Where it's like, hey, look, if y'all walked away tomorrow, we could figure it out here in Florida. Because I think you're right about, do we want to contribute? You said it perfect. Do we want to contribute to the national debt? Like, does Florida really want to be the state, like some of these other states, that are spending an ungodly amount of money on programs they may or may not need?
Yeah.
It's like, it's a safety net for us in Florida to say, hey, we're healthy. We have a balanced budget. We don't even need a state income tax. We're supporting business, but we're also making sure our environment's in check. Like, all of these small things matter. And then to be able to stand on that national platform and say, you know what, y'all can keep the money. That's an interesting thing to me.
All right.
But it's also like with transportation, some of the Republican administrations denying billions of dollars of like high-speed rail funding and stuff like that.
Yeah.
That's frustrating. I get the sentiment. I get the conservative ideology of, hey, look, if we take the $1 billion from the feds, then we have to match it locally, and then we're on the hook for the next 30 years to maintain that.
There you go.
Is that the main argument the Republicans have
That's
for
really,
not taking that money?
Yeah, that's really what it comes down to. Like for example, when at the time Governor Rick Scott, when he declined, I forget how many
It was
millions
a lot of money.
dollars. Might have been in the billion range. I don't know. It's specificities there, but it was a lot of money at that time, record numbers, and that was going to go to revitalize our infrastructure, and then obviously go towards help funding a high rail system along the I-4 corridor. He turned it down. But people don't see the unintended consequences of that would have been obviously going through and having to foot the bill for that, when at the time Florida was nowhere near where we are right now economically to be able to support something like that. Now we could have, right? That's why. And I think at that time that was appropriate. Okay. But now, right, hey, let's take what we can get and let's look at the way forward ultimately. But do that again. Let's not just, do a grab all. Because you gotta do it reasonably, and that is the main argument. Is that we can expand and do these wonderful things, but ultimately we have to find a way to then cover that delta up, because you pay for the infrastructure, but we pay for the upkeep and maintenance, and that's what it's about.
I would imagine that's a unique ideology at the state level, because if you see other states taking billions of dollars, how does Florida not have their hand out? It's kind of, I feel like it'd be hard to turn down federal money. Administrations have done it, like you just said,
time and time again. And
it's almost, hindsight's 2020, right? But boy, it would have been a lot cheaper back then to take the billion in like 2002.
Yeah.
Things are a lot more expensive now.
That's a good point. And then the same thing goes to also receiving government subsidies for Medicaid, right? People look at how come we just don't take it, right? Expand. We can cover 800,000 or however many more millions of Floridians. That's great and all. And I'm all for finding innovative solutions on how we do that appropriately, because I'm all for, and I will continue to always be for, increasing access to affordable and sound healthcare, right? But how do we do that? Through private-driven solutions, okay? And not just through government handouts and subsidies. Because if we were to just expand tomorrow and we take more dollars, right now we're just that much more reliant now on the federal government. But then guess what? We have to foot that bill, because a lot of times right now, there was a study that was done that nearly 1/3 of every physician right now does not offer Medicaid coverage. Okay. Or we'll see a Medicaid patient, if you will. Yeah. Think about that. All right. So that's just like one example. All right. And then we have to incentivize. Okay. Well, why should, right, a private practice doctor, right, be forced to take that coverage? Because when Medicaid is only going to reimburse 60 cents of the full dollar, right? Who covers that 40% delta? We do, right? Either through our premiums are increased because of thereof.
So the money has attachments with it.
The money has attachments, and people don't see those unintended consequences and attachments behind the scene. They just look at expanded and we can get more coverage for all. But someone has to foot that bill. Someone is footing that delta. And it puts that much more strain. I served on Tampa General's, right? County board, for crying out loud, right? I saw the numbers. I was a treasurer, and we see the numbers, and you look at the delta that grew year over year throughout. And we would have been in for a world of hurt if we did not. Tampa General would have received, a sizable amount of dollars from the federal government because of the COVID assistance or whatever program, something like that. So you look at all these different things, and that's what helped out not only Tampa General, but hundreds, thousands of hospitals across the country, all right, that kept them afloat. And that's what it is, because we just couldn't foot that bill for a lot of those things, because you have, Medicaid patients coming in, and hey, how do you cover that delta? Because someone's footing that.
There's so many issues to work through, and there's so many experts that you can rely on to find. I don't want to use the word answer, right? Because there really is no perfect answer to any of this. As soon as I think one way, then I think, well, no, but that kind of makes sense too. For you, if you win, what are immediate things that you see right now where it's like, okay, day one, like I need to handle X, Y, Z?
All right. So when I win, we're
Yes,
gonna
sir.
put it out there. It's the good juju, as they say, right? All the good aura and the energy. First thing I want to address is a continuation of the great progress that was made in 23 and 24 when it comes to property insurance premiums. All right, driving and directing more dollars back, right, to adequate programs that will help to continue to ease the burden for the average, homeowner right now. Second thing, I'm definitely going to go in there with a pumped up chest, having taken out minority leader and say, hey, let's bring home the bacon now for this district because I can do such thing. And I really, going in, I want to serve on the Appropriations Committee, Health and Human Services, and Infrastructure Strategic Committee, being able to figure out how do we fix our roads, let's get money for them. How do we address the aging population that we have, in my district, and being able to bring the dollars back and drive down healthcare costs, and then being able to appropriate the dollars that we need for community projects and everything else, and focusing on the state, right, as a whole on homeowners insurance and infrastructure, battling what we're seeing right now, the effects of illegal immigration coming into not only just across the border, but guess what, that feeds over into our state. And how do we ensure that we stand behind our men and women in uniform to ensure that they're adequately resourced and trained. Right? It shouldn't be about defund the police. How do we fund them, ensure that they have the right resources and training? All right, that's what it's about. So a multitude of things, but those are just some of the top level issues that I really care about.
Yeah.
Um,
Is there a balance between your constituents and the people that live in your district, but and then opposing that to the people that live in the entire state, right? Something that might be great for your district might be bad for the state, and something that might be great for the entire state might be unfair or might hurt our district. Is there a balance to walk between those two things? And that might just be my ignorance of how state politics
yeah.
work.
You play this dual persona. Oh, truly. A lot of people won't talk about it, but you do play this dual persona of how do I remain the champion for all of my local community issues and being able to bring back home the bacon for my district, but then also, right, going along with what needs to be done for the state at a statewide level and championing that legislation as well. So it truly is that how do you balance that, right? Because you want to make sure that you still focus on the real issues that your legislative delegation cares about, but still bringing back home the bacon, right?
Yeah.
For me is that I truly, like I always said before, my constituency gets me elected, and my constituency is what I care about, and those are the real issues. But generally speaking, when I'm out door knocking, you'll be surprised how many people say, "Oh my God, wow, I never knew that. I've never had anyone door knock before, my door. I've never realized that we had an election that this pivotal upcoming." These are some of the things you kind of hear about, and generally most people, I'm talking to them, their number one thing right now has been homeowners insurance. Number two thing is education, and then roads and infrastructure. Those are really the top three issues that I'm hearing right now. And that's what people care about. They're not, every now and again, you have that one person that just will say, Democrat, Republican. And then obviously you say it, and either they love you and give you a hug or they slam the door in your face. You'll have a couple of those, yes. But generally speaking, everyone truly just cares about community issues.
I think they always have.
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
somewhere along the line, things got a little messed up. I think the media has a lot to do with it, and social media especially has exacerbated some of those things.
Yeah.
I wish more people would care, man. I wish I wish there were more voters. I wish our voter turnout was higher.
Yeah.
I wish more people paid attention to the politics, local politics. Local politics matter so much.
Oh my gosh.
I mean, whatever you agree on a national platform, when you talk about abortion and gay rights when I was in high school, gay rights was talked about at debates.
Yeah.
And it was a partisan thing. It was
Yeah.
like the Democrats kind of wanted gay rights and the Republicans didn't, in an interesting way. Now there's details within that. I think the details were like the Republicans didn't want to change the definition of marriage, and there's all those details, but I think on a national platform, there are conversations that don't necessarily affect your pocketbook in your life, but they certainly affect how you feel about the nation you live in and how you feel about future generations and how you feel about how your family's going to interact in the decades to come, which are very important issues that people should care about.
Yeah.
But man, we've lost sight along the way with local government. It's interesting to me that you door knock in places where people are like, wow, no one's ever showed up to talk to me.
Yeah.
It's kind of a shameful thing. I mean, people should be like, oh, I'm exhausted with the politicians coming at my door. I think people should reach out more.
Yeah.
Is that something you focused on, is like that grassroots, getting out in the field, really talking to people?
Really hitting it home there and just being involved in the community ultimately. Being, you know, and showing people that, hey, I am a product of my community. I'm born and raised here. That's really what it matters about. But taking it a step further, staying true to the issues. I'm not going to start going down some rabbit hole and all the different social issues and the sound bites and all that. No, people are sick and tired of it. And I've witnessed firsthand people mentioning it time and time again that they're tired of it. So stay clear of that, and you focus on what you can bring to the table, right? And the ineffectiveness and the failed policies that the incumbent has made and has continued to do. That's how you win an election.
Yeah.
Because no one can scurry away from their track record.
Issue driven, right?
Yeah.
Reality focused.
That's
it. Sounds like you are. In constituent focus too. Focused on, hey, what do you really care about? You're a voter. What do you really care about? You know, and asking those questions.
That's right. Yeah, it shouldn't be about, what does the party always care about? All right, and obviously that plays into the key to certain, to some extent. When it comes to obviously your moral compass, things of that nature, and ideological view. Yeah. But at the end of the day, I think it really just focuses on the community issues, and that's why I'm so proud to be able to talk about, it's a plethora of things, and having been born and raised here, and seeing Tampa just changed into this sprawling city. I mean, I always said Tampa is a big, small town, and you're never more than 3 degrees of separation from someone that you may know here. And I love that. But how do we embrace that? And everyone else may be talking about, the Florida man in Tampa's, and Florida is some crazy whatever red run state or whatever they want to say. But people are moving here for a reason.
That's right.
For a good reason.
And they're motivated a hell of a lot more than just politics.
Thank you. They're here for the lifestyle. They're here for the public safety. They're here for the thriving economy. They're here because they want to succeed and ultimately grow and raise a family in a state such as Florida. That's why. And how do we continue to uphold those values and ensure that we can continue that for the next generation?
Not just for the people that are moving here, to add to what you just said, how do we extend, because by the way, those are all items, those are all points we enjoy.
Yeah.
We enjoy the fact that it's kind of easy in terms of business red tape here in Florida, right? We enjoy the fact that we don't have an income tax. We enjoy our beautiful environment that should be preserved. And we enjoy a lot of the same things that people are moving here to one day enjoy too. How do you keep those great things, for decades to come? How do you ensure that those things will not be lost as we grow to 30 million people by 2050 or however the hell many people are going to live here by then?
Yeah.
I think the greatest challenge Florida has is sustaining the quality while we grow economically, while we grow in population, while we grow culturally. Yeah. People have to remember too that a lot of people are moving here that are not obviously from here. They're moving here, right?
Yeah.
So they're from California and they're from New York, and a lot of Canadians are living here, and a lot of people from around the world choose to buy real estate and visit Florida. With that comes differences of opinions and ideologies and cultures. So it's like our population's going to change, our culture's going to shift, our economics of the state are going to change. But how do you stay true to those tenets that we love today, like that we enjoyed 30 years ago, that we enjoy today, that I hope my children will enjoy? I don't ever want to see a state income tax. I don't ever want to see our natural environment disrespected. I want to see Florida purchase more state lands. I think actually it's expressed itself in this Republican administration. Look at what Ron DeSantis has done for the environment. He surprised everyone that first year when he was given I remember he did, they have like I think it's called the Governor's Lunch at the State Fair.
Yes.
And that was the first time I saw him speak in person. I got to shake his hand and meet him. And he was talking so much about things that Democrats forever have talked about, but he was a champion of it here in Florida.
Yeah.
I mean, he spoke so much about the natural environment. I was like, is this dude a Republican?
Yeah.
And that's a shame on me for having that kind of box ideology. But I think a lot of people kind of just assume that Democrats are for the environment and Republicans aren't, or whatever, if you want to draw those black and white lines. Yeah. Everyone in the state cares about our environment. It's really nice to see that that's not really a partisan issue.
Absolutely, because of what what we have, and we want to ensure that we can keep the beautiful landscape. That's what people move here for.
Right.
But to just further that point very briefly, looking at a bill that was passed in 2023 in regard to the acquisition or purchasing of land here in Florida. Against any foreign adversarial entity. Okay. That's another way that we can ensure that we keep and preserve what we have here in our resources here in the state of Florida. If you look at my opponent, and some components on the left will say that bill is discriminatory and it is far this and far whatever. Here's the thing. If someone actually reads the bill, okay, which I have done, and you dissect it, right, guess what? That bill does not infringe, right, on any Chinese American, Russian American, or Iranian, or whoever the case may be. It doesn't infringe on that individual if they're an American citizen or a permanent resident, okay? It focuses on foreign entities that are majorly controlled, right, offshore, and any foreign political party or a member of a foreign political party, right, of that member of. That's what it focuses on to ensure that we can preserve our values here in agricultural land. Because guess what? Food security is national security. If we were tomorrow and just have lost, right, our farmland, our ag land, we're screwed. People would be up in arms in a frenzy, and this world would tip upside down overnight. Yeah. We have to preserve what we have right now. It's a shame where in the last, I think, and I know Senator Collins talks about this to some great extent, but we now, I think, are down to 8 or 10 now cattle for companies, that are family cattle-owned farm companies here in the state, where, if you were to go back, probably 2-3 decades ago, it was about 40 or 50, right? I mean, we're seeing that where it's just getting consolidated and people either going out of business, they're going insolvent, right? They're moving away. That's an issue, right? That bill specifically says that you cannot acquire any agricultural land or any critical infrastructure, land or agricultural land within 10 miles of, say, a power plant, right? Or a water use facility, water treatment plant, things of that nature, right? That's what it says. The Democrats, right, when the bill was first written out, it said that you couldn't buy any, ag land or critical land within 20 miles of a military installation or, water plant, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Democrats came back and said, no, make it 1 mile. That's discriminatory. It's wrong. And then ultimately they decided and ended up getting passed to where now it's written in law, it's 10-mile radius now around any military installation or critical infrastructure land. But guess what? That right there, that's not pro-America. It's not pro-Florida. How someone could come back and say, oh, no, let's just open the gates. Because guess what? Right now, you and I, if we were to go to China or anywhere else, right? Good luck. We have to show years of tax returns and this and that and jump to all the hoops and hurdles. And then, right, and then I'm not going to keep pointing the finger on China, but if you were to go there, it's not owned, right? You don't own that land. You rent it because the land is owned by the state. Okay. Right. So you look at these kind of things, like even, for example, if I want to go buy land in Abu Dhabi or Saudi Arabia, I just couldn't go do that. I have to show, I think it's 4 years of tax returns to do such, right? These are the kind of things you have to think about. All we're doing here in Florida is just leveling the playing field that has been set from other countries, right, back to us. So this is what we're doing. And I hate, and I really do, and I don't use the word hate often, but I hate when people make it such a partisan issue and simple things like that. Yeah. How do we, cherish, and hold to our values and ensure that we can keep that?
It seems like a lot of things fall into that box where something that should not be partisan turns partisan. Just the state of the world. It's the state of our national election cycle and campaign cycle and how things are going. There is this kind of weird thing. We spoke earlier about getting off of the government's teat, right? The national teat of the United States.
It's going to be like a meme government. Or something now, a tweet.
The teat, the government's teat, yeah. But like, it kind of makes sense that if the federal government has a gap like that, it does make sense that a state would come in and be like, you know what, here's where we draw the line.
Yeah.
Like the federal government's not going to block China from buying some agriculture land next to a military installation. Okay, well, the state of Florida will.
Yeah.
Like there is that kind of step up to the plate thing.
Yes.
That Florida has to do if the federal government's not going to do their job.
Absolutely. And I know a woman right now who I met when I was out campaigning who is a Chinese American.
Oh,
right?
I've dealt with several cases at my brokerage.
Yeah, and she's phenomenal. I mean, I met her and she went, "Oh my God!" I mean, I agree with all these different things, and she subscribes to like the Republican ideology because she sees where the country is headed, and that's where I look at it. And people look, until you've walked in those shoes and have witnessed that and gone through that, everyone thinks they're an expert on something just because of the tweets and the headlines or the snippet, right? But no, do you really know the issues? Do you really dive into the issues? And that's what we try to combat. And that's why your elected official should be forward thinking enough and to actually be of an open mind to get to know what the policy is for what it is, and then being able to obviously disseminate that to the proper parties.
Is that the Democrats' argument? It's just discriminatory, period. They don't see the issue with allowing an adversary to purchase land next to a military installation.
No, and I have, and again, my opponent is on record saying that this is a discriminatory bill. And you go, well, we never banned a Chinese American, or anyone. We're banning foreign adversaries, foreign entities, right? From going over and acquiring
companies.
Yeah, companies, right? Institutions. That's what we're focused on, right? For any adversarial nation, because at the end of the day, I hate to tell you, but guess what? It's not all roses between the relationship between ourselves and Russia and ourselves and China, ourselves and Iran, okay? There has to be some stop measures put in place, okay, to ensure that we can defend this homeland. That's what it comes down to ultimately. And yes, the Democrats will just go say, "Oh, it's discriminatory," and they point the finger, "Oh, you're bigots," and this and that. Same thing with you look at with the governor, and the reason why I explicitly mention this is because I have heard many factions on the left use this. Even my opponent talks about it. The fact of the governor banned an AP course, African American Studies. And I even had a lady call me when I was on a radio show a couple months ago and said, "Well, isn't that discriminatory and you're racist and whatever?" Well, how can I be racist, right? How can I be racist towards African Americans? I woke up black the last 27 years, okay? Seriously. But the funny part is that when you really dive into it, the College Board sent down this AP curriculum pilot program. So it wasn't even instituted across the entire state. It was a pilot program that had injected queer studies and queer theories, all right, studies into the program, African American Studies program. See, this is what doesn't make the headlines. And so what happened was the state, all right, Board of Education came back and said, we're going to cut that curriculum part out. And we're actually going to put in some extra curriculum, some additional African American study courses and et cetera, and provide that, right? Oh no. And then when that happened, College Board said, "Oh no, look, see, we're not going to accept that." And then they just pointed the finger and said, "Look what they did. They banned it all together." No, we provided you a better solution, right? These are the kind of things people don't see from the inside out. And I'm talking to my friends that are in the legislature, and I'm seeing the behind the scenes works of this, right? The Democrats just, boop, we're going to just do this. We're going to go throw a fuzzy out there, and then look what they did. They're bad. No, come on. Get away from the partisan sound bites. And so my good friend, who's a state representative, proposed legislation in the bill that ensured no distortion, no CRT, things of that nature in the curriculum, because kids need to be kids, need to focus on the curriculum. And then they also passed another bill that ensured that we would protect African American studies. All right. So it's so funny how people on the left point the finger and say, "Oh, they're banning African American studies and books and et cetera," but yet we went and actually passed a bill that said, "No, we're going to ensure we keep that."
Yeah.
And that was just this past legislative cycle in 23.
It's a misalignment with the people on the left that are largely in charge of the federal government, especially right now.
Yeah.
The powers to be in large, very influential states like California, like New York, that lean left, imposing their will on a state that doesn't want that shit. Basically.
Simple.
And when Florida gets it and we look at it, we go, we don't subscribe to that. Whatever y'all want to do in California, that's great. But when the federal government comes here and tries to display a policy like that in front of us, we don't want it. Maybe California reads at the top of the line and says, we're good with that. Florida's not. And I'm glad that Florida stood in the way of a lot of that stuff. I mean, the don't say gay thing, the whole freaking country was all upset at Florida. Well, we don't want our children to be taught certain things that are inappropriate.
Yes.
It's not even really about homosexuals, because Florida is extremely accepting of homosexuals, largely. Now, there's certain lines with children and education and stuff like that. Yeah. But, oh my God, the population of homosexuals in Florida is unbelievable. Go over to St. Pete, even
pride
here in
parades.
Tampa. Yeah, I mean.
Yeah, we're very accepting.
And I've been to them. I mean, we got, I didn't go to a pride parade, but I went to Tampa Bay Pride's annual event. My grandfather was invited to be, what do you call it when you're like you're not in charge of like a parade. I don't know. I forgot the term for it, but he was invited to be like the, I don't know, king of Tampa Pride or whatever it was. So I went to the event and I heard all their stories. These are people that just want to live like everyone else, that want to enjoy the same rights. And I believe that Florida's done that. However, Florida has a tightrope to walk in terms of people being upset at the government, but not looking at that fine print and not looking behind the curtain like you just talked about. I think if more people knew the full story, they would understand why Florida blocked specific legislature like that.
Absolutely.
More people need to know the truth.
More people need to know the truth, and that is why you have the people who are in power currently and that are sitting, that are incumbents, don't want that to be known, because guess what? Oh, now I am losing and I have to relinquish the throne. And that is why you have people on the left making such outlandish statements, right? And at the end of the day, back to the don't say gay bill, right? Not once in the bill did it say those exact words, okay? Primarily, I think the big thing around it, the headline, truly the intentions, is that it opposes actually talking from grades K through third grade, I believe, mentioning anything around, sexual orientation, ideology, all that. Keep it away from those young kids, right? Their brains are sponges. Teach them the alphabets, the mathematical equation, etc. That's when you need to focus on the real curriculum, and let that child get of age before you start talking about those kind of key things. Because if you look at in California, for example, where you have drag queens going into elementary schools, personally, I don't think that's okay. I think if you are a parent and you subscribe to that, then you should do that on your own accord,
right?
Personally. But again, just keep it out of the children. That's simple. And I think most people, I would truly think, would agree with that. Just keep it away from my child.
Well, it's also a parent rights issue. I mean,
that's it. And give it back to the parents.
Right. The parents absolutely should have a say about that sort of stuff. And I think most people were on board with what we did here in Florida.
I would think so.
But there is that vocal majority on the left that only points to those issues. And it seems like the Democrats point more to social issues. I don't know if it's because they don't want to express some of the ideas about the economy and insurance and healthcare. And they do talk about stuff like that. But I'm just saying, it seems like more of their focus is on social issues and pointing at those headlines and pointing at, like you said, they're trying to remove African-American AP studies from our curriculum. It's like, well, the reason is because they tried to shove in some of this other stuff.
Exactly.
And they probably don't want to talk about that because it would expose their position,
Yeah.
It would expose their position, and then they would have to defend maybe the stuff that they don't want to defend.
That's really, I think, what it truly comes down to. And the reason why you would want to focus on a social issue is because it drives emotion. That is the base root of it all. It drives emotion.
Get out and vote or else.
People love drama. They have to get that. So when I can attack you and pull on your heartstrings, oh my God, can you drive a turnout, right? And you can completely divide, right, fractions of people.
It's a little sexier than separating your roof from your homeowners policy.
Oh, but heck yeah.
It gets people to the voting booth.
Yeah. When I can talk about, oh my God, if, your right to get an abortion, if I can talk about, marijuana, if I can talk about, these issues, African-American studies or, children, whatever, that is going to drive turnout like no one's other business. It's going to pull on the heartstrings. But talking about, how do we reappropriate dollars out of a certain fund for transportation or whatever? People don't want to hear that. They're like, okay, yeah, sure.
We're towards the end of this thing here. I don't want to keep you all day. It's 3:00 now, but is there anything else that you'd like to talk about as we wrap up? I mean, we definitely want to pull up your website. People want to learn more about you. Tyler, could you pull that up?
Absolutely.
What is the website if people want to learn more about your positions?
Yeah, so it's votericosmith.com, VOTERICOSMITH.com, and you can actually follow along. We have Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook, and we have our website, Vote Rico Smith. You can also visit my personal page as well, which is Real Rico Smith, REAL Rico Smith, and there you can really just follow along on our engagement and what we're doing here in the community. And ultimately, again, you're going to see there that we have such a wide range of support and endorsements, and our platform points are straight to the point. We focus on what people actually care about, community issues.
It's refreshing for a politician to say that. Yeah. What we care about at the dinner table is I believe, largely what all people should care about. And social issues are extremely important, but prioritizing your family, your convictions, what you believe, I think is paramount moving forward in this country, because we've gotten so far away from that. We've exhausted it on this show talking about it.
Yeah.
And I've talked about it before, but
that's right.
More people should give a shit.
Absolutely. And the one thing that you'll hear a lot of is affordable housing, but take a step back. Housing affordability, and that's what we mentioned on the website. Housing affordability is what it's about. Because affordable housing, you can't just subsidize your way out of anything, right? Right. And I know, the mayor and a few others, they've made these outrageous claims and promises on, we're going to provide X number of thousands of units of affordable housing. But how do you do that, all right? Because Senator Brandes will talk about it, right? He's out there doing his projects, and it's costing $300,000 to $400,000, right, for a condominium or project, and the mortgage and the numbers just aren't there. You can't provide that to an affordable housing, individual, or to a subsidized rate. You just can't do it because the math ain't mathing.
Yeah, okay? We woke up and now there's no such thing as affordable housing.
So you look at things like ADUs and things like driving dollars back, obviously, through ship and sell programs and whatnot, housing affordability. Yeah. How do we ensure that our marketplace remains affordable? Obviously, reducing homeowners insurance premiums, right? That drives things like housing affordability, because it gets passed through the landlord back to the tenant, right? You have to look at all these different things. That's what we have to focus on. And so I'll end it on that note, but thank you so much for having me.
Good luck to you in November, and thank you very much for coming on the show.
Thank you so much. God bless.
All right, God bless. Thank you, everyone. See you next week. Hey guys, if you want to watch episodes just like this one, make sure to click right here to view the rest of our full episodes, and also make sure to subscribe by clicking right here. Thank you for watching.